think if you were using just your finances to run your small business, you might be actually flying blind. And I say this as someone who was 100% guilty of this. I used my bank account balances and my QuickBooks statements to figure out how my business was doing for years. And again, I would see these numbers. I would know, hey, we're getting more cash in the bank, but I wouldn't know enough to actually figure out what does my business need because of those numbers. So rather than looking just at financial numbers, I realized I needed to look at operational numbers as well. In other words, the numbers that reflect what we are actually doing in the business. For that, I couldn't look at QuickBooks. I needed a scorecard. A business scorecard is a spot where you start filling in the numbers that reflect the operating activity in your business, which is just a fancy way of saying the things you're doing. Are they working or are they not? This is actually the real scorecard we use here at ProcessDriven every single week to keep my small business aligned. What I have up at the top are the major numbers I want to measure in the business, and above them, I have a priority level. This is because way back, I read the book The Goal, which talked about the theory of constraints. In other words, if you were to picture your business as a busy road, where would the traffic jams be? Where do things slow down? Where do things get hard? That constraint, that bottleneck, that traffic jam is the thing you need to relieve if you want your business to keep growing. That's what's showing up at the top, and it's something I update each week as things change. But I will say, generally speaking, our priority stays pretty fixed for a few months at a time. On our key metrics tracker, we have just 7 numbers, which is a huge improvement because back when I first started doing this, we had like 50 and it was so overwhelming. We have now just 7 because these are the 7 numbers that I know if they're going in the right direction, the business is going in the right direction. I'm going to talk you through how I came to each of these numbers, and I want to give you some exercises so you can start filling out your own as well. Also, if you want to grab the spreadsheet I'm using with my team, I have a copy of it in the description for free if you want to just download that there so you can follow along. So the first number we want to identify is something that reflects the first step in your customer journey. In other words, when you think about people who have ultimately become your clients, where did they first encounter you that you were able to measure in some way? Can you think of it? For me, it is email subscribers. Almost always people will come into our world, they'll sign up for our newsletter, they'll get one of our free resources, and then they will be on our email list, and eventually, it might be years down the road, they decide, oh, I need help with my processes, and they come to work with ProcessDriven. For you, it might be site visits to your website because most people just find you on search and they navigate your website. If you're a local or referral-based business that struggles with this, I would instead think about what are the things you're doing that allows you to meet people who eventually become customers if you're doing it the more word-of-mouth way. So for example, for my brother-in-law, he knows most of his customers come from networking events. So the metric for him might be how many networking events did he attend? It's not necessarily the same type of thing of the number of email subscribers, but it could roughly correlate if he knows networking events is where he gets most of his clients. So go ahead and think about this for yourself. What is the first measurable step in your customer journey? Write that down as your first metric. Then we're on to the second one. What is a measure of someone becoming a lead that exists in your business? This is the first step that you can measure that lets you know this person actually might want to work with you. Like they're not just in your world, they're actively interested. For my business, this is our discovery calls. So we have free 45-minute calls with people who want to systemize their business. We get on the call for free and talk them through what that would look like and recommend either to work with us or not. It wasn't always this simple though. Before I had this kind of model, I previously had to look at people who were visiting a sales page, and I used that as my leads metric. If you have a more, again, traditional business, it might be people who are inquiring about quotes or using your contact us form. Something to just raise their hand and say, hey, I'm like genuinely considering this right now, and you have the ability to measure it. That is your second metric. From there, we get to the conversion metrics, and this is where you actually break down the results of those potential sales. Did they buy? Did they not buy? For me, I'm breaking down 3 of our major products and tracking on a weekly basis how many purchases did we have of each. You might find it helpful to just track revenue here as a weekly metric, but for me, I like to track quantity sold because that's the numbers that my team are actually influencing. Overall revenue is kind of a bigger picture with a lot of different pieces going into it. So I focused on the 3 top products, and I want my team to focus on them every single week. Fill in your top products or SKUs or services, and then let's move on to our last category, which is capacity. So capacity just means what are we able to do? Because the worst thing in the world for our small business is that we get all of these leads come in, and then all of a sudden we aren't able to fulfill them. I was on a call recently with a small business owner who confessed that, he's sold to clients who are now having to wait 3 or 4 months to start their project. And yay, but also that is incredibly stressful. And this final column and category is about making sure you don't find yourself in that mess. In other words, scale up what you're able to produce as demand increases. If we're tracking the early numbers, we should be able to see a wave of sales coming and start adding to our team to match. But figuring out a number that reflects capacity might be a little bit funky. I mean, if you are in a physical product business, this should be pretty straightforward. What's our inventory levels, right? That tells you what do we have available to sell. But if you're in a services business, this can be a little odd because, we're selling people's time. Do we track the time available? What I have found helpful on the services side is tracking the number of days a client needs to wait to start a project. The last quarter, our goal was 7 days. We wanted a client to be able to book a project and then start systemizing their business within 7 days. We've since shifted to 4 days. And I think that's a really good indicator of capacity because we know when people are able to start based on people's weekly schedules and Calendly settings and so on. And so we use that to indicate, do we have enough capacity or not? Do we need to hire more coaches or not? If you're in services space like we are, I might consider doing the same. And if you have any questions about this, just drop a comment. If you're in more of an infinite inventory situation, such as a product or a SaaS business, another option I would consider here is support load. Oftentimes, that is what capacity looks like for these scaled offers. And I actually have this on our scoreboard as well, because we also sell digital products and so on that require support. So for us, once again, rather than tracking number of support tickets or any of that stuff, we just look at response time. So if we're responding to emails within 1 business day, we're groovy. If we ever consistently take more than 1 day to respond to emails, we're in a bit of a crisis and we either need to change our offer so we need less support or scale up our support capacity. Once this scoreboard is created, it's on you to make sure it is filled in. So what we do at ProcessDriven is we have a task for every person on our team, repeating on a weekly cadence, to go in and fill in their numbers. Yes, we require it manually. Because if someone can't spend 2 minutes filling in a number, they're sure as hell not going to spend 10 minutes thinking about that number. And so requiring this to be manual has been an intentional effort, at least so far. But wait, once we have the metrics in place, we have one remaining column in each section that's blank, and that is our goals. How do we figure out the numbers we actually need on a weekly basis to be green or red or winning or losing or succeeding or failing on a given week? Well, the answer to that question is in this video here on the end screen, where we talk about how to create a strategic annual plan for your small business, figuring out the big picture numbers, and then using those to fill in this kind of company scoreboard with actual goals that match your business strategy. Because if you don't have really good goals inside the scoreboard, I'm afraid you're just going to be tracking mediocrity. On that positive note, until next time, enjoy the process.